Hi everyone, I'm Whitney Well from Star Hearth Astrology, and I wanted to make a little video as kind of an invitation. Now that we're in our third year of Uranus and Taurus, and we're heading into Taurus season, and over the next 2 weeks, the Sun, Venus, and Mercury will all conjoin Uranus and Taurus. I wanted to kind of make some space and invite you to open your eyes to possibly what's coming by reflecting on what has been happening in these years in the past, as an invitation to look into the changes that Uranus is making in your chart, and inviting you to explore in your life. So I'm going to speak a little bit generally about Uranus and Taurus. Then I'm going to talk about some of my experiences using my chart as an example. And then I will do a really brief all the way around the chart for each rising sign and kind of where you can kind of do some astrology investigation. So this is the first kind of thing like this that I've done. So if you like it, please let me know, and I can do more stuff like this in the future, because I think it can be really helpful, especially when we're about to encounter a transit again, and especially with these the outer planets that move very slowly, that we have at like over half a decade with Uranus and several with Pluto to kind of notice, right, when they are getting activated, what comes up for us. And so we can kind of feel them a little bit more, even though their transits are taking so long. So the term that I came across that I think I accidentally used in a video, and then I was like, ooh, I like that term, for Uranus, is the game changer. And I like the game changer because it doesn't have a positive or a negative kind of sense, at least not in the way that I hear it. Right? It's something that changes the rules, and suddenly the lay of the land looks very different. So that can happen mentally. That can be, that can be a flash of insight that changes the way things look. It can happen physically, right? So something that you thought was quite stable suddenly and surprisingly becomes completely unstable. There's a shift. Really sudden changes can be associated with Uranus. And so when it hits something in your chart, so when it's passing over something in your natal chart by aspect, so if it's right on top of it, but also if it's just forming an aspect with it, the topics associated with that planet will experience sudden shifts. There'll be this kind of shakeup. There can be internally really a strong sense of rebellion. And if there isn't that strong sense of rebellion, sometimes it comes externally. So that will be external circumstances change so that you have to make changes in that area. And it can come from either place. You can be restless and have Uranus inside, or you can be kind of dumped out in a completely new experience. And that, I'm talking about Uranus in a personal way, Uranus in mundane astrology, so global astrology, the astrology of major politics and history. I'm not addressing that in this video, so won't go into that piece. That piece is a huge piece for Uranus and Taurus, and we can see some really interesting things with Uranus and Taurus. The last time was at the end of World War II in the 40s. And so, yeah, we can think about a lot of different ways that Uranus was revolutionizing some things back then. Now, Taurus is the sign that has to do with our material security, with our material safety. So there's a few signs that have to do with safety. Cancer has more to do with our emotional safety, our sense of belonging. Taurus is really like Do you have food? Do you have shelter? Do you have health care? Do you have housing? You know? And then, right, once you have those things, then it wants to make those things kind of as nice and life supporting as possible. So Taurus is really quite embodied, and it really has to do with our experience of our own bodies, how they interact with the world, how they connect with the world, how they feel nourished by the world. And Uranus and Taurus is going to shake that up. And so Uranus and Taurus is a really interesting combination because we have Uranus that is the least stable, most kind of innovative, most rebellious planet in the sign that is arguably the most stable, the least willing to change, kind of the most grounded, right? It's a fixed earth sign in Taurus. We don't want those things to change too much. You know, we like to be familiar with Taurus things. We don't want a new house every week. That really makes the Taurus parts of us grumble. So Uranus and Taurus is shaking us all up. Yeah, it is kind of revolutionizing wherever it's moving through your chart. And in Taurus, right, those are things that we're not used to switching up too much. And some of it's cool, some of it will show up in little ways. An example for me is last fall, we had Mercury go retrograde in Scorpio opposite Uranus. And right in the middle of that retrograde on the Cazimi, I found out about this food service that would ship certified organic, but misshapen or the wrong size produce to my door way out here in the middle of nowhere in the Western US. And so we started doing that. And that was I really like that example because for one, it shows how tiny things can be. And also it was so literal. So we've got Taurus, we've got food, we've got access to food. The way that I want to feed my family, the way that makes me feel safe has a lot to do with access to food. And then it is Uranian in two ways. One, technology makes it possible. Technology was the way that I found out about it. I think it was an Instagram ad. But also technology allows them to do it. Right, the infrastructure in place to actually ship it, the internet to kind of put the whole thing together. And then it's truly Uranian produce. So it's produce that for whatever reason doesn't look normal or doesn't fit in, is outside of the norm, which is a very Uranian thing. So that's just a tiny example of a little way that it can show up. So I think this year it's really important to talk about this Uranus and Taurus because of the pandemic. Because of the last 16 months or so, and how we have all changed the way that we live. And right, the Taurus, that Taurus sense of stability, we doubled down on, or we were in our houses for a year, or right, we really, really got to the heart of that. We really got to experience Taurus in a different way. And now we're heading into Taurus season. And so, right, are we going to change the way that we live in a really basic way as a response to the experiences of the past year? And I think that most of us will find that we desire to do so. Change where we live, change how we eat, change how we connect. I think also, right, it's springtime and we've all been locked in our houses for the pandemic, but also for the winter. And so having that real sense of going out there and feeling your body, against the natural world in the sunshine with the plants coming back to life in the Northern Hemisphere. I think that has a big charge behind it. And that can be really rejuvenating for people. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal experience of Uranus and Taurus now that this is our, well, I guess this is our 4th year experiencing it, but we're 3 years into the transit and we have 5 more years to go. So it's a good little check-in midway through this extended transit of Uranus and Taurus. So I am an Aquarius rising. I use whole sign houses. So I have Taurus in my 4th house. And right, Taurus in the 4th is, you know, depending on its ruler, depending on the condition of Venus, is generally a very stable place. Don't like to move around too much, feel really grounded, at home. And when Uranus moved into Taurus, I very suddenly just kind of picked up everything, basically threw a dart in a map and moved across the country with no plan, really. I mean, I had a roommate and that was it. I didn't have a job, I didn't have anything. So very Uranian transit starting out. I also have Saturn at 0 degrees of Aquarius, so anything that enters Taurus squares my Saturn. It kind of goes through a period of having to deal with kind of the internal status quo that I've set up for myself. But Uranus entering that broke that status quo. And so there was a lot of kind of like breaking a bunch of internal rules that I had for myself that happened when Uranus moved into Taurus. So that is what happened in 2018. Uranus went into Taurus in May of 2018. And then in May of 2019, I ended up all of a sudden moving to a different state to follow my partner who got a job in a new state. So again, I was moving. And then in late April, beginning of May of 2020, my partner got a different job and we thought that we were going to be moving again, but with the pandemic, they kept delaying it and delaying it and delaying it. And finally they said, we're putting it off for a year. So we thought we were moving, but then, right, Uranus, ever the surprise, was like, JK, you're not moving. And what's happening this year? Well, what's happening this year, we kind of got a double whammy. We had an opportunity to move to a new state that we were debating taking. It was involving certain risks and certain risks. So we weren't sure that we were going to do it anyway. And then right in the middle of making that decision, my partner got a great job offer even in another state. And so then we all of a sudden just kind of are in the process of moving somewhere else. And so I think this is the way that it's going to be. Now, as soon as you get to that point with Uranus of like, oh, okay, this is the way it's going to be, then there's going to be a surprise, because with Uranus, the deal is really expect the unexpected. So as soon as there's a pattern, right? I almost expect this not to be happening in a year, because as soon as there's a pattern, Uranus is going to switch it up. No patterns. Stop getting used to it. A piece of advice that I was given by the astrologer Austin Coppock about Uranus transits is to take them like experiments. If you head into a Uranus transit thinking, I'm going to know, I'm going to figure it out, something crazy is going to happen, and then I'm going to figure out the thing, and then I'll hold rigidly, to that thing. They will just, it's just never going to be like that. You're going to have that constant disappointment. And so the way to approach a Uranus transit is really to go in, treat it like a science experiment. Go in with a hypothesis when really your goal is less to prove or disprove a hypothesis and more to gather data. And then the sudden shifts They just give you more data of what is it like to move to a different state, and then the next year to move to a different state, and then the next year to move to a different state. What are all of these pieces? What am I learning? And so the question for me, right, is really what constitutes a foundation in my life. Right? What do I really need? Now, moving around this quickly has made me, an outsider pretty much, in the sense that I'm not grounded within the community. I don't know my role in the community in any kind of consistent way. And so, right, by trying out all these different communities, I am learning about myself. I'm learning about the nature of community. I'm learning about the nature of home. I'm learning about the nature of foundation. Uranus in the fourth can do some other things, which I've seen. Uranus can be sudden beginnings and endings. And the fourth house has to do with our family and our home. And since Uranus entered the fourth, I lost all 4 of my grandparents. So in 2 years, they were all gone. And I also had a surprise baby. There's been lots of just kind of sudden entrances and exits. And pretty much all of my grandparents were perfectly healthy and then died within a month or within a week or so of getting sick. And so it was all quite sudden. And so, yeah, kind of tracking those things. Another astrologer might say that like your parents are getting eccentric or something with Uranus and Taurus. I haven't really experienced that, but my parents are fairly eccentric to begin with. So yeah, so those are the things that I'm tracking. And so when I head into the next week, I'm going to be looking for Venus conjoining Uranus. And Venus conjoining Uranus is maybe the most potent one because Venus is the ruler of Taurus. So Venus is the ruler of Uranus. So Uranus is getting its annual check-in with its ruler, where our values will push up against the way that things are, and we will start looking for innovative solutions, right? So if it doesn't feel good to live where you live, suddenly you pick up and move. Maybe you're switching houses, maybe whatever. It's interesting to note if we sign a lease now, our lease will be up a year from now. So we'll be talking about moving, even if we're not moving states again. So this is going to be happening everywhere in your chart. And then Mercury is going to come through. Our thought patterns, the way that we think that things are, the way that we think that things need to be, our attachment to our materials to ground us. Mercury will hit Uranus and get those flashes of insight and maybe start a revolution. And then the sun. And the sun, the sun being our sense of purpose and our big project that we're working on. Maybe making some hard lefts. So I just want to prepare you for the surprises that could arise. Now, if we use, if your Lord of the Year is Venus or Mercury or the Sun, these transits can hit harder as well. What all 3 of them are going to do after they conjoin Uranus is they're going to square Saturn. So there's going to be this burst of rebellion, and then it's going to run into the wall of the status quo and the way that things are, and really the work that it takes to change things. I think this could be a really incendiary week. Also, we will hear the verdict in Derek Chauvin's trial, and I think that could be really inflammatory. And I think we will see a tremendous amount of social unrest around it, no matter which way it goes. So yeah, Now I'll do kind of a brief, where you are looking in your chart. So I'll go through each rising sign and talk about where Uranus is and what you could kind of expect. So I'm using whole sign houses to do this. So we'll just go through them. If you are an Aries rising, Uranus is in your second house, and it has been revolutionizing your relationship to money, personal resources, how you make money, and your connection to nature. So if you were previously really connected to nature, maybe you had to stay inside and stare at a screen the whole time during this past year, or vice versa. If you are a Taurus rising, this is your first house, and your mind is getting blown with what you are learning about yourself and how your understanding of yourself is changing. If you are a Gemini rising, this is in your 12th house, and so the deep secrets that you hide from yourself, that denial of materialism that you might feel, there are kind of depth charges being detonated down there, really to help you look at your shadow so that you can integrate your shadow, so that you can become more free and more whole. If you are a Cancer rising, this is in the 11th house of community. And if you guys have watched this whole video, it's interesting to note my partner, who I've moved around a bunch for, is a Cancer rising, has Uranus in the 11th. And so, right, that's the place of community and friendship. And so, right, my home, my 4th house has been changing because we've been moving, and his 11th house, his friend group, his community has been changing because we're moving. So you can see that in both of our charts. And so, right, it's connecting with community in a different way, with maybe a different group of friends, with different communities, with more eccentric people, or with more foreign people. Uranus is also what is foreign to us. If you are a Leo rising, this is happening in your 10th house of kind of life's work and big projects. So contemplating career changes, suddenly finding that the direction that you thought you were going is absolutely not the direction for your life. That kind of the names that you were claiming for yourself, the labels that you were claiming for yourself, have switched. Something sudden, there was some hard lefts, and suddenly you are, not a mother, not a, I don't know, your job title changed, your entire field changed, all of those things. Big changes if you're a Leo rising, especially if the midheaven is in Taurus. If you are a Virgo rising, this is in the 9th house. And so this has to do with what you consciously integrate. And so you may find yourself getting interested in new topics and then pursuing them. You may find yourself all of a sudden really interested in studying farming or food or some kind of tourist stuff. This transit can also have to do with traveling internationally, which probably most of you are not because of all of the travel restrictions, but maybe it's time you got that itch and you're going to go out and do it again. If you are a Libra rising, this is in the 8th house. So that has to do with what you owe the other. This has to do with the status quo of your relationships, what the implicit rules are about who owes who what. It has to do with power dynamics. So this also has to do with funds, other people's money. So this might mean, you're getting a divorce and splitting up the money. Your relationship with money is getting revolutionized. Your relationship between, what you're going to do with inheritance. Both my parents are Libra risings, and as I said, all of my grandparents just died, so they are coming into their inheritance and contemplating kind of making sudden changes and changing the way that things are now that they have access to more material resources. So that can be part of that. If you are Scorpio rising, this is in the 7th house. This is about relationships for you. This is about relating to different kinds of people, being more innovative in the way that you see relationships. You can be quite inflexible about relationships, and Uranus and Taurus is really kind of offering a new window into them. If you're a Sag rising, this has to do with the 6th house and your daily work. So this is shaking up your daily habits, which have to do with how you eat, how you maintain your health, exercise, all of that stuff, but also what you're doing during your days. So that can have to do with employment. So you may find yourself always changing jobs around this time of year for these past few years, and it's really exploring different types of work. So just take everything as an experiment. I know we're all supposed to be building our careers from age 18 months until we die, but that's not really real. That's just late stage capitalism. Then if you are a Capricorn rising, this is happening in your 5th house of creative self-expression. So also of children and of risk-taking. This can be, you know, children suddenly doing different things, having a different relationship with them, having a different relationship to what you create, and right, needing to move the earth around to kind of help you find yourself. If you are an Aquarius rising, this is happening in your 4th house of home, of family history, of your connection to the earth, this real foundational place, both of your life and of your psyche. And so there can be a lot of sudden changes in who you were and who you thought that you were, kind of in the context of your family, shifting around a lot. Or Kelly Surtees actually said, the astrologer Kelly Surtees said that people with Uranus transiting their 4th become almost nomadic. Hey yo. So there can be a little bit of that. If you are a Pisces rising, this is happening in your 3rd house of communication, of thought patterns. This is a real, I loved this transit. Right when Uranus was in Aries, it was moving through my 3rd house, as a way for just changing the way that you think about things. And it can really overturn a lot of internal biases. It can do a lot of good for upgrading your technology that you use. But really the 3rd house is the place of autopilot. And so it's kind of interesting to have Uranus move through and kind of dump out the toy box. And so you can kind of see how you're using your ideas in different ways. And that's all the way through. That is Uranus and Taurus through all the houses. So I would love, love, love to hear the connections that you're making in the comments below. Feel free to like and share this video. And if you like this kind of individual treatment of a transit like this, let me know and I'll do more of them. Okay. I hope that you have I hope there are happy surprises. I hope there are happy surprises with Uranus and Taurus. Okay. Have a good week. I'll be back.